It started with 7 words that shattered 15 years of marriage. Apologize right now or get out. Those words weren't whispered in anger. They weren't spoken during some explosive fight. They were delivered calmly, coldly, as if my husband had already decided my future. And he had no idea that within 6 months I'd be gone, not just from the house, not just from the city. I'd leave the country with our son, build a completely different life. And the day he realized what he'd lost, there wasn't a court, a lawyer, or a single apology that could bring us back. But before I tell you how everything fell apart and how I rebuilt my life from nothing, please do me one favor. If you enjoy emotional family dramas, real-life inspired stories, and powerful endings where justice finally catches up with the people who deserve it, make sure you watch until the very end. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Now let me tell you how everything began. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, originally from Portland, Oregon. For most of my adult life, I believed I had the kind of marriage people envied. My husband, Daniel, worked as a corporate attorney. Smart, successful, confident, the kind of man who walked into every room expecting people to move out of his way. When we met in college, that confidence looked attractive. Years later, it became unbearable. Together, we had one child, our 12-year-old son Ethan. Quiet, funny, obsessed with astronomy. He loved science museums, documentaries, and building tiny robotic projects in the garage. He was my entire world. If I had to choose between keeping my marriage or protecting Ethan, there was never going to be a difficult decision. But I didn't know that yet. Our marriage didn't collapse overnight. It happened slowly, like watching paint crack on an old house. At first, Daniel simply corrected me. "Emily, don't interrupt. Emily, that's not how it happened. Emily, you're exaggerating." Small comments, easy to ignore. Then came the decisions. He picked where we lived, where we vacationed, how much money I could spend. Even though I worked full-time as a pediatric nurse, I earned good money, but every paycheck went into a joint account controlled entirely by him. Whenever I bought something without asking, he'd say, "Do you really think we need this?" Not "Do you want it?" Not "Can we afford it?" Always "Do we need it?" The answer was almost always no. Friends slowly disappeared too. Whenever I planned lunch with coworkers, Daniel suddenly needed me home. Whenever my sister visited, he'd find reasons to complain. "They stay too long. They're loud. They're a bad influence." Little by little, the people who reminded me who I used to be stopped coming around. Isolation isn't always locked doors. Sometimes it's simply convincing someone that staying home is easier. The strange thing, everyone loved Daniel. At church he volunteered. At charity events he donated. At Ethan's school, teachers called him the perfect father. He smiled for photos, remembered birthdays, opened doors for strangers. He knew exactly who to become whenever someone else was watching. Behind closed doors, it was different. There were no bruises, no screaming, no broken furniture. Only something much harder to explain: control, silence, humiliation, the kind that leaves no visible scars. One Friday evening, Ethan walked into the kitchen carrying a permission slip. "Mom," I looked up from making spaghetti. "What's up?" Our science club got invited to the International Youth Robotics Camp in Canada. His eyes sparkled. I got selected. I hugged him immediately. "Oh my gosh, Ethan, that's incredible." He laughed. "I know." Then his smile faded. "It costs $2,200. I didn't hesitate. "We'll make it happen." He smiled again, until Daniel walked in. "What are we making happen?" Ethan handed him the brochure. Daniel glanced at it for maybe 5 seconds before tossing it onto the counter. "No," Ethan blinked. "What? No, but Dad, it's a waste of money. I earned my place." I said no. The conversation ended there, at least for Daniel, but not for Ethan. He quietly picked up the brochure, folded it, and walked upstairs. I heard his bedroom door close. That night I confronted Daniel. "Why?" He didn't even look away from his laptop. "Because I said so." That's not an answer. It is in this house. It's Ethan's dream. It's a children's camp. It's international. So experiences matter, Daniel sighed dramatically. You always encourage unrealistic ideas. Science isn't unrealistic. He's 12, so he needs discipline. He needs opportunity. He shut his laptop, finally looking directly at me. No, that was it, one word, final. Absolute. The next morning I quietly called the camp organizers. I explained everything. They told me scholarships had already been awarded, but there was one remaining partial grant. If we could cover $1,000, Ethan could still attend. 1,000. I had that money in my personal savings account. Money I'd secretly kept before marriage. I paid it without telling Daniel. Watching Ethan receive that acceptance email was worth every penny. He cried. I cried too. For the first time in months our house felt hopeful, until Daniel found the receipt. It happened 3 days later. He stormed into the kitchen holding my bank statement. What is this? I froze. You used your savings? Yes. You went behind my back. I helped our son. You disobeyed me. Disobeyed, not disagreed, not argued, disobeyed. The word echoed in my head. I looked at him differently for the first time, not as my husband, but as someone who genuinely believed he owned me. You owe me an apology. I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it. That made him furious. You think this is funny? No, I think it's sad. You embarrassed me. There was nobody there. You undermined my authority. Our son earned this. He'll survive. I won't teach him to stop dreaming. Daniel stepped closer. His voice became ice. You have 2 choices. I stared at him. He pointed toward the front door. Apologize right now. He paused just long enough for my heartbeat to speed up. Or get out. The kitchen fell completely silent. I looked toward the hallway. Ethan stood there. He'd heard everything. His frightened eyes met mine, and in that exact moment, without saying a single word, I knew our lives were about to change forever. The rest of the evening passed in complete silence. Daniel returned to his home office as if nothing had happened. He answered emails, took a conference call, even laughed once. Meanwhile, I stood in the kitchen unable to move. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I finally understood something I'd spent years refusing to admit. This wasn't an argument. It wasn't a rough patch. It wasn't stress from work. It was control. And my husband had just made me choose between my dignity and my home. Around 9 that night, Ethan knocked softly on my bedroom door. Mom, come in. He stepped inside carrying his favorite astronomy blanket. His eyes were red. Were you really going to leave? My heart broke. I pulled him into a hug. No, sweetheart. Then why did Dad say that? I didn't answer immediately. Children deserve honesty, but they also deserve protection. Sometimes those 2 things don't fit together. Finally, I whispered, sometimes adults forget how to be kind. He rested his head on my shoulder. Was it because of me? No. Promise? I promise. He looked at me carefully. I don't want to go to robotics camp anymore. What? If Dad gets mad, I don't care. I gently held his face. You earned that opportunity, but I don't want you fighting. Tears filled my eyes. 12-year-old boy was already trying to sacrifice his dreams to keep peace in the house. That was the moment I realized Daniel wasn't only hurting me anymore. He was teaching our son that love meant walking on eggshells. The next morning was Saturday. Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He kissed Ethan on the head, asked him about baseball, complimented my coffee, then looked at me. So, ready to apologize? I stared at him. For supporting our son? For disrespecting me? I won't apologize. His smile disappeared. Then I meant what I said. He picked up his briefcase. You know where the door is. Then he left. I spent the entire day thinking. Not crying, thinking. For years I'd believed leaving was impossible. Where would I go? Could I afford it? What about Ethan's school? Health insurance? Lawyers? Housing? Every question felt impossible, until I wrote them all down, one by one. Then I started writing solutions beside each problem. For the first time in years, I wasn't imagining surviving. I was planning. Monday morning, I arrived at the children's hospital where I worked. Normally, I loved my job. Helping frightened children smile made 12-hour shifts worthwhile. But that morning my mind wasn't on medicine, it was on freedom. During lunch my supervisor, Karen, noticed something was wrong. "You've barely spoken all day." "I'm fine," she smiled knowingly. "Nurses invented the phrase, 'I'm fine.'" I laughed. Then unexpectedly I cried, not loudly. Just enough for everything inside me to spill out. Karen waited patiently. When I finally told her everything, she didn't interrupt once. After I finished, she asked one question. "Emily, are you safe?" I thought carefully. Physically, yes. Emotionally, I wasn't sure anymore. "I think so." Karen nodded. "Sometimes emotional control becomes something worse." "I know. Do you have family?" "My older sister, Olivia?" "Close. We haven't talked much." "Why?" I knew the answer, because Daniel never liked her. That evening I called Olivia for the first time in nearly 8 months. She answered on the second ring. "Emily?" Her voice sounded surprised, then worried. "Is everything okay?" The moment I heard genuine concern, I started crying again. She listened quietly, didn't judge, didn't say, "I told you so." When I finished, she simply said, "Come over." "I can't." "Why not?" "Daniel," I didn't ask what Daniel wants. Silence. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You still have a family." Those 6 words healed something inside me. The following weekend, Ethan and I visited Olivia. She lived just outside Seattle with her husband and 2 daughters. Watching Ethan laugh with his cousins felt strange. I hadn't realized how quiet he'd become. He played basketball, built Lego castles, even smiled without looking over his shoulder. Olivia noticed too. She pulled me aside. "When's the last time you've seen him this happy?" I couldn't answer, because I honestly couldn't remember. That night after dinner, Olivia handed me a folder. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside were brochures, housing assistance, legal aid, counseling services, support groups, emergency family housing. I looked up. "You planned this." "I started collecting information 2 years ago." "What?" "I knew one day you'd call." "You knew?" "I didn't know when." She squeezed my hand. "But I knew someday you'd realize you deserved better." Driving home Sunday evening, Ethan stared out the window. "Mom?" "Yeah. Can we visit Aunt Olivia more?" "Of course. I like it there." "Me too. It's peaceful." Peaceful. A child shouldn't notice the difference between peace and home, but mine did. When we arrived, Daniel was waiting in the driveway, arms crossed, expression cold. "You ignored my calls." "I was driving." "You were at Olivia's." "Yes. I told you she fills your head with nonsense." "No, then why go?" "Because she's my sister." He laughed sarcastically. "I see." He looked at Ethan. "Go inside." Ethan hesitated. "It's okay," I whispered. Once Ethan disappeared into the house, Daniel stepped closer. "You embarrassed me again." "How?" "My mother called." "So?" "She heard you were complaining about me." "I wasn't complaining. I was asking my sister for advice." "Same thing." "No, it isn't." He leaned in. "If you keep poisoning people against me, you'll what?" He smiled. "You'll find out." That sentence echoed through my mind all night, not because he yelled, but because he didn't. The calmest threats are often the most dangerous. The next morning, I found our joint checking account nearly empty. Every dollar I'd deposited from my last paycheck gone. Daniel had transferred the money into an account only he controlled. When I confronted him, he shrugged. "I manage our finances." "That's my paycheck." "Our paycheck." "You didn't even tell me." "I don't need permission." I stared at him. For years I'd believed we were partners. Now it was obvious. Daniel believed he was the owner, and I was an employee who had become difficult to manage. I quietly walked upstairs, opened my closet, and for the first time, instead of wondering whether I should leave, I started calculating how. For the next 2 weeks, I pretended nothing had changed. I smiled at breakfast. I packed Ethan's lunch. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, and listened as Daniel talked about court cases and promotions as if we were still the perfect family. He mistook my silence for surrender. It wasn't. It was preparation. Every smile hid a decision. Every ordinary day brought me one step closer to leaving. The first thing I did was open a brand new bank account at a different credit union. Not because I wanted to hide money, because I needed access to my own paycheck. When my next salary arrived, I quietly changed my direct deposit. It wasn't much. But for the first time in years, every dollar I earned belonged to me. I checked the balance every night, not because of the amount, because it represented something I'd almost forgotten. Freedom. The second step was paperwork, birth certificates, passports, medical records, school transcripts, vaccination records, insurance information. Every important document was stored in Daniel's office filing cabinet. Locked. He believed no one knew where he kept the key. But after 15 years of marriage, I knew every hiding place in the house. Late one Friday night, after he'd fallen asleep on the couch watching television, I quietly unlocked the cabinet. I scanned every document, made certified copies where possible, then returned everything exactly as I'd found it. By morning, he had no idea anything had changed. At the hospital, Karen became my quiet source of strength. She never pushed, never judged. One afternoon during lunch she asked, "Have you spoken to a lawyer?" "I can't afford one." She slid a business card across the table. "My cousin handles family law." I looked at the name, Rebecca Lawson. "She works with women leaving controlling marriages." "I don't know if I'm ready." Karen smiled gently. "You don't have to decide today. You only need information." That sentence stayed with me. Information isn't commitment, it's protection. The following Tuesday, I met Rebecca during my lunch break. She listened carefully, asked detailed questions. Had Daniel ever hit me? No. Threatened me physically? No. Controlled money? Yes. Isolated me? Yes. Made major decisions without me? Yes. Humiliated me? Repeatedly. After nearly an hour, Rebecca closed her notebook. "Emily, what? You've described coercive control." The words felt unfamiliar. "I thought abuse meant bruises. So do many people." She explained how financial control, isolation, intimidation, and emotional manipulation often formed patterns recognized by courts. "You've been living under those patterns for years." Hearing someone say it aloud made everything real. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. There was a name for what I'd been living through. That evening, I found Ethan sitting in the garage working on his robot. Normally, he'd narrate every improvement. Tonight, he was unusually quiet. "Something wrong?" He hesitated. "Dad talked to me." "What did he say?" "He said families stay together." "Okay," he said, "if moms leave, it's because they stop loving their children." My chest tightened. "What did you tell him?" I didn't say anything. He looked down at the unfinished robot, but I didn't believe him. I knelt beside him. "Why not?" "Because you always choose me." I wrapped my arms around him. He was 12. Yet somehow he already understood the truth better than many adults. Days turned into weeks, then something unexpected happened. Daniel announced exciting news over dinner. "I've accepted a partnership." "Congratulations," I said politely. "It comes with international clients." "That's wonderful. And we'll probably relocate next year." I looked up. "We? Of course." "Where?" "London." He smiled confidently. "It'll be good for my career." I waited. He never asked what I thought, never asked how Ethan felt, never even asked whether we wanted to move. He simply assumed we'd follow, just like always, except this time he was wrong. The next weekend, Ethan attended a regional robotics competition. I cheered louder than anyone. Daniel spent most of the event answering work emails. Near the end of the competition, one of the judges approached us. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes, I'm Professor Michael Harris." He introduced himself as a coordinator for an international STEM education program. "We've been following Ethan's work." I smiled proudly. "He's incredibly talented." Professor Harris nodded. "There's a scholarship opportunity in New Zealand next year." I blinked. "New Zealand? It's highly competitive." He handed me a brochure. If he qualifies, tuition, housing, and travel would all be covered. My heart raced. Daniel barely glanced at the brochure. "Well, think about it." The professor smiled politely and walked away. The moment he left, Daniel folded the brochure in half. "Ridiculous." "Why? We're moving to London." "I don't remember agreeing." He laughed. "You don't need to." That night after Ethan went to bed, I sat alone on the back porch. I looked at the New Zealand brochure beneath the porch light. A scholarship, a fresh start, an entirely different future. For the first time, leaving wasn't just an escape. It was an opportunity, a chance to give Ethan the life he deserved. Over the next month, I quietly researched everything: visa requirements, nursing shortages, international licensing, school systems, housing. I discovered that experienced pediatric nurses were in high demand overseas, especially in New Zealand. The salaries were competitive. The work-life balance was better. And there were pathways for families relocating legally. The idea sounded impossible, which was exactly why it fascinated me. One evening, Olivia called. "How's the plan?" I looked around to make sure Daniel wasn't home. "I think I know where we need to go." "Where?" I took a deep breath. "Another country." There was a long silence. Then she laughed softly. "You finally started dreaming again?" "No," I smiled. "I finally started believing I can." 3 days later, an email arrived while I was at work. It was from a children's hospital in Auckland. They had reviewed my RSUM. They wanted to schedule an interview. I stared at the screen. Read it once. Twice. 3 times. My hands trembled so badly that I almost dropped my phone. For years, I'd believed my future depended entirely on Daniel. Now someone halfway across the world was offering me a future he couldn't control. And I knew, deep inside, that this single email might change everything. The interview invitation sat on my phone screen for almost 10 minutes. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in years, I was looking at a door that wasn't controlled by someone else. A door to a completely different life. A life where Ethan could dream without asking permission. A life where I could make decisions without fear. A life where my voice mattered. The interview with the hospital in Auckland was scheduled for Friday morning. I prepared more carefully than I had ever prepared for anything. I reviewed my nursing experience, my certifications, my achievements, the projects I'd worked on, the children I'd helped, the patients' families who had written thank you letters. For years, Daniel had made me feel like my accomplishments were small, like my career was just something I did while waiting for his life to happen. But sitting there in front of my laptop, I remembered who I was before I became someone's wife. I was Emily Carter, a dedicated nurse, a mother, a woman who had survived more than she ever thought possible. The interview lasted 45 minutes. When it ended, the director smiled. "Emily, your experience is exactly what we're looking for." My heart started racing. "We would like to offer you a position." I covered my mouth. "Are you serious?" "Yes, there was one condition. You would need to relocate within 4 months. 4 months. A normal person might have seen that as impossible, but I saw something different. A countdown. That evening, I sat in Ethan's room. He was building another robot. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up. "Sure. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?" He thought for a moment. "Somewhere near the ocean." I smiled. "Why?" "Because I like peaceful places." Then he looked at me. "Are we moving?" My heart stopped. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you look different lately." "Different how?" "Like you're not scared anymore." I looked away. Children notice everything. Even the things adults try hardest to hide. I didn't tell him immediately. I wanted to make sure everything was real. I wanted legal advice. I wanted a plan. Most importantly, I wanted to protect him from disappointment. Meanwhile, Daniel became more confident than ever. He believed he had won. He thought my silence meant I accepted his rules. One night, he was sitting in the living room talking on the phone. I walked past and heard him say, "Emily finally understands how things work." I stopped. He continued, "She knows I make the important decisions." I stood there quietly, listening, and something inside me changed. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. He wasn't planning a marriage. He was managing an arrangement. And I had spent years trying to convince someone to love me who only wanted control. A week later, Daniel announced another decision. "We're having a farewell dinner." I looked confused. "For what?" My promotion, the London move, I nodded. When did we decide this? He looked annoyed. Emily, don't start. Don't start what? Questioning everything. I think I deserve a say in where I live. He laughed. You always make everything complicated. I stared at him. No. What? I've just spent years staying quiet. His expression changed. For the first time he realized something was different. That night he followed me into the bedroom. What happened to you? I looked at him. What do you mean? You used to understand. Understand what? That marriage requires sacrifice. I nodded slowly. You're right. His face softened. Until I finished my sentence. But sacrifice should go both ways. Silence, then anger. You've been talking to someone. No, you have. My sister. Your sister hates me. No, I looked directly at him. She just knows me. The next morning, Daniel did something unexpected. He apologized. At least he tried to. I was stressed. I listened. You know how much pressure I have. I said nothing. I didn't mean those things. I looked at him. Which things? He paused. The argument. No, I shook my head. Not one argument. Then what? 15 years. He didn't answer because he knew. I remember every time you told me my opinion was wrong. I continued. Every time you controlled money. Every time you made me feel like I needed permission. Every time Ethan watched me become smaller. His face hardened. So this is about Ethan? No, I whispered. It's about me. That afternoon, I received my official employment documents. The position was confirmed. The relocation package was approved. Everything was real. I printed the papers, then hid them carefully. The next step was the hardest, telling Ethan. I waited until Saturday morning. We sat together in the backyard, the same place where he used to build robots when he was younger. Ethan, yeah, I need to tell you something important. He immediately looked worried. It's not bad, I smiled. Actually, it's a new beginning. I showed him the documents. He read slowly. Then his eyes widened. New Zealand? I nodded. We might move there. He stared at me. Really? Yes. His first reaction wasn't fear, it was excitement. Can I see the ocean every day? I laughed through tears. Maybe. Can I join a robotics club? Definitely. Can we start over? That sentence broke me, because my son didn't say, can we run away? He said, can we start over? But before we could begin our new life, Daniel discovered the truth, and the way he reacted proved I had made the right decision. I came home from work one evening. Daniel was standing in the hallway, holding my relocation documents. My heart dropped. Where did you get those? He looked at me with disbelief. You were leaving? I stayed silent. You were actually going to leave me? I took a breath. No, his expression changed. You were leaving us? I looked at him. No, Daniel. I picked up my bag. I was saving us. His face turned cold, and then he said the words that confirmed everything. If you walk out that door, he stepped closer. You will regret it for the rest of your life. I looked at him, and for the first time I wasn't afraid, because I finally understood something. The hardest part of leaving wasn't walking away. The hardest part was believing you were allowed to. The night Daniel discovered my plan, I expected anger. I expected shouting. I expected him to try to stop me. But what surprised me most was not his anger. It was his confidence. He truly believed I would never leave. After 15 years together, he thought he understood me. He thought I was too afraid, too dependent, too comfortable. He thought the woman standing in front of him was still the same woman who apologized just to keep the peace. He was wrong. You can't just take Ethan and leave. Daniel's voice was low, calm, almost frighteningly calm. I looked at the documents in his hand. You found my papers. Answer me. I can make decisions for my son. He laughed. Your son? I felt my heart tighten. Our son? No, Emily, don't do this. Do what? Act like I'm the enemy. I stared at him. Daniel, I spent years trying to be your partner. And you treated me like someone who needed permission. His jaw tightened. You are destroying this family. I shook my head. No, I looked him directly in the eyes. You destroyed the idea that this was a partnership. The next morning, everything changed. Daniel called his attorney. I knew because I saw the email notification appear on his laptop. He wasn't trying to understand. He wasn't trying to fix things. He was preparing for battle. And honestly, for the first time, I was ready too. Rebecca, my lawyer, warned me. Emily, this is the stage where many people give up. Why? Because once the other person realizes they are losing control, they often increase pressure. I nodded. What should I expect? Arguments, guilt, promises, threats. I looked down. I've already seen all of those. She smiled gently. Then remember why you started. Daniel changed overnight. The man who barely noticed my emotions suddenly wanted to talk. I miss us. We can fix this. Think about Ethan. Every sentence sounded reasonable. That was the dangerous part, because controlling people rarely say things that sound obviously cruel. They mix truth with manipulation. Yes, Ethan mattered. Yes, family mattered. But family was never supposed to mean one person sacrificing everything while another person controlled everything. One evening, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table. I'll change. I looked at him. Will you? Yes. What does that mean? I'll be better. How? He hesitated, and that hesitation answered everything. Because real change requires understanding what you did wrong, not just fear of losing something. Then he said something I never expected. You'll never find anyone who understands you like I do. I almost smiled, because he was right. Nobody had ever understood me the way he did. Nobody had ever known exactly what words would hurt me most. Nobody had ever known exactly how to make me doubt myself. 3 weeks later, my visa was approved. The hospital confirmed my start date. The move became real. Ethan was excited. He researched New Zealand schools every night. He watched videos of Auckland. He learned about the beaches, the wildlife, the culture. For the first time in years, my son was looking forward, not worrying about what might happen next. But Daniel wasn't finished. One afternoon, he arrived home early. Ethan and I need to talk. I immediately became alert. About what? Father and son. I looked at Ethan. He looked nervous. I'll be right here. Daniel sighed. Emily, stop controlling everything. The irony almost made me laugh. For years he controlled everything. Now my protection was called control. I allowed the conversation, but I stayed nearby. I heard Daniel say, "Your mother is making a mistake." Silence. You know I love you, right? Yes, I don't want you leaving. I know, she is choosing this. Another silence. Then Ethan said something that made me freeze. Mom isn't choosing against you. Daniel stopped. What? She's choosing a life where everyone is happy. Nobody spoke. Then Ethan walked away. That night, Daniel looked different. Not angry. Defeated. Maybe for the first time he realized Ethan understood more than he thought. The day before our flight, I walked through the house one final time. The living room where we celebrated birthdays. The kitchen where I cooked thousands of meals. The hallway where Ethan took his first steps. So many memories, some beautiful, some painful, but they were part of my story. I didn't hate this house. I hated the person I had become inside it. Someone quiet, someone afraid, someone who forgot her own worth. At the airport, Ethan held my hand. Mom, yeah, are you nervous? I smiled. A little. Me too. I looked at him. But we're doing it. He smiled. Together. Those 2 words gave me more strength than anything else. As the plane took off, I looked down at the city disappearing beneath the clouds. A place where I had spent 15 years. A place where I had lost myself. But also a place where I discovered my strength. I didn't know what waited for us in New Zealand. I didn't know if starting over would be easy. I didn't know if Daniel would ever forgive me. But I knew one thing. For the first time in years, my future belonged to me. 6 months later, I was standing outside a children's hospital in Auckland, wearing my new work badge. Ethan was starting his first day at a new school. The ocean was only 10 minutes away. The air felt different. The life felt different. But healing doesn't happen overnight, and some battles follow you even after you leave. Because just when I thought Daniel was finally out of our lives, I received a message that changed everything. It was from him, only 4 words. We need to talk. The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday evening, 4 simple words. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for almost a minute. 6 months earlier, those words would have made my heart race. I would have wondered what I had done wrong. I would have immediately searched for a way to make things easier for him. But this time, something was different. I didn't feel fear. I felt calm, because I had finally learned something important. Someone else's anger does not mean you are guilty. Life in New Zealand wasn't perfect. Anyone who says starting over is easy is lying. There were difficult days. There were lonely nights. There were moments when I questioned whether I had made the right choice. Learning a new country, building a new routine, helping Ethan adjust, starting a new job, everything required patience. But the difference was the challenges belonged to me. They were problems I could solve, not problems created by someone trying to control me. My first few months at the hospital were challenging. The medical system was different. The procedures were unfamiliar. The accents took time to understand. But my coworkers welcomed me. One day, my supervisor said something I'll never forget. "Emily, you know what I notice about you?" I smiled. "What?" "You make people feel safe." I looked down, because for years I had forgotten that was one of my greatest strengths. Daniel had convinced me I was difficult, too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding, but here people valued those same qualities. My compassion, my patience, my ability to listen. Ethan changed too. The boy who used to ask permission before every little thing started becoming himself again. He joined a robotics club, made new friends, spent hours designing machines. One afternoon, he came home holding a trophy. "We won." I hugged him. "I'm so proud of you." He smiled. "Mom? Yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For choosing us." Those words stayed with me forever. A week later, I finally answered Daniel's message. I wrote, "What do you need to talk about?" His reply came quickly. "I need to apologize." I looked at the message. An apology. Something I had begged for years ago, something I thought I needed to hear. But now, I realized I didn't need his apology to heal. I had already healed without it. Still, for Ethan's sake, I agreed to a video call. When Daniel appeared on the screen, he looked different. Older. Tired. Not the confident man who always believed he was right. The silence between us lasted several seconds. Finally, he spoke. "I was wrong." I said nothing. I thought providing money and security was enough. I listened. I thought being the person who made decisions meant I was protecting my family. His voice became quieter. But I wasn't protecting anyone. A pause. I was controlling everything. Those words surprised me, because for years I had wanted him to admit it. I wanted him to understand. But hearing it now, after I had rebuilt my life, it felt different. Not like victory, like closure. I lost my family because I couldn't listen. I looked at him. "Daniel, no, let me finish." He took a breath. "You gave me chances." I stayed silent. More chances than I deserved. For once he wasn't defending himself. He wasn't blaming stress. He wasn't blaming me. He was accepting responsibility. Then he asked, "Do you hate me?" I thought about it carefully. "No," he looked surprised. "I don't hate you." "Then what do you feel?" I looked toward the ocean outside my window. "Peace." We talked for almost an hour, not about getting back together, not about pretending the past didn't happen, just honesty. He admitted he had been afraid of losing control. He admitted he cared more about being respected than being kind. He admitted he had pushed away the people he loved. Before we ended the call, he asked, "Will Ethan ever forgive me?" I answered honestly. "That depends on what you do next." "What do you mean?" "An apology is a beginning." I paused. "Not a solution." Months passed. Daniel started therapy. He began rebuilding his relationship with Ethan slowly, not through expensive gifts, not through grand promises, through consistency, through listening, through showing up. The father Ethan needed wasn't the powerful attorney everyone admired. It was the humble man willing to admit mistakes. 1 year after leaving, I returned to the United States for the first time, not because I missed my old life, because Ethan wanted to visit. We stood outside our old house, the place where everything changed. Daniel met us there. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Ethan walked forward and hugged him. Daniel closed his eyes, holding back tears. I missed you, buddy. I missed you too. Later, Daniel and I stood alone. I used to think leaving meant you gave up on us. I looked at him. And now? He smiled sadly. Now I know leaving was the only way we could both grow. I don't tell this story because I think every marriage should end. Some relationships can be repaired. Some people truly change, but love without respect is not enough. A family is not built by one person sacrificing everything. A family is built when everyone has a voice. Today, Ethan is older. His robotics projects have become more advanced. He still loves science. He still loves the ocean. And every once in a while, he reminds me of the day we left. Mom? Yes. Are you glad we went? I always smile. Yes. Why? Because the truth is simple. I didn't leave because I stopped loving my family. I left because I finally learned to love myself too. And that was the moment I understood sometimes walking away isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of the life you were always meant to live.